Ethiopia is seeking to tighten its grip on the rebellious Tigray region Friday by appointing a new local leader during a military offensive that has killed hundreds and shaken the wider Horn of Africa region, where federal troops' 10-day push against the northern state has sent refugees flooding into Sudan and raised fears it may suck in Eritrea or weaken an African force opposing Islamist militants in Somalia if Ethiopia diverts troops from there. It may also blemish the reputation of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who won a Nobel Peace Prize for a 2018 peace pact with Eritrea and had won plaudits for opening Ethiopia's economy and easing a repressive political system. Abiy accuses the Tigray People's Liberation Front TPLF, which rules the mountainous region of more than 5 million people, of treason and terrorism. They say he has systematically persecuted Tigrayans since taking office in April 2018. Well, the conflict began last week when Abiy says the TPLF attacked a military base since when his army has been carrying out airstrikes and ground combat, which the government says has liberated West Tigray. Well,
former Nigerian ambassador to Ethiopia, OLUSEGUN AKINSANYA, joins us now on the show. Good afternoon, Ambassador, and thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Well, thank you very much, Adesua, and thank you very much.
Ambassador AKINSANYA, thank you so much for joining us on the show. If you can hear me.
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
You have been watching developments unfolding in Ethiopia. At the heart of this is increasing ethnic divisions. What would you say is responsible for this, despite promises by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and efforts he has made? Let us also not forget that he won the Nobel Peace Prize for bringing that dispute of the border wall with Eritrea to a halt. What is really playing out here?
Well, thank you very much. I think one has to understand the backgrounds to the current situation in Ethiopia. Ethiopia, like Nigeria, actually the appellation is the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, with well over 100 million people. It is multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and of course has a variety of peoples in various regions of Ethiopia. For over 30 years, there was a broad coalition of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Republic. It was a grand coalition that fought Mengistu to a standstill. And at the height of that group was the TPLF. They are the main elites, they were the rulers, of which one of them was Meles Zenawi, who they had this democratic coalition. But 2 years ago, Abiy Ahmed came in, very young, dynamic, former military officer from the Oromo tribe, and he came out with a peace mission, reconciliation, writing the literature, new culture, developing a new culture for Ethiopia. Those were his grand ideas. And of course, within that period, not only did he pursue this question of reconciliation, freeing a lot of prisoners that were in exile in Italy, in the United States, and even in Addis Ababa itself. And he also boosted the peace agreement with Eritrea, which earned him the Nobel Peace winner. But of course, one of the things that he refused to do was that he was not going to be part of that coalition. of which the TPLF, the Tigrayans, were the avant-garde. They were the rulers, they were the elites, they were the warning government. And there have been problems of disenfranchisement. There have been problems that the other main bodies were not getting the best out of it. So within this, he refused to be part of that coalition. That, of course, was not satisfactory to the Tigrayans or to the leaders of the Tigrayans in the northern parts. And that explains what we are now seeing today. There was supposed to be an elections, and Abiy Mohammed said, well, because of the COVID-19, this election was not going to take place. But, of course, that was not very acceptable to the Tigrayan leaders or to the TPLF leaders, to the extent that there were quite a lot of problems. They defied. It was seen as a defiance. They accused the federal government of shutting up the internet. And that is what played out in what we are seeing, that gave the semblance of nearing a secession, a lot of fights between the Tigrayan forces in the north and also the federal forces that are in the northern part. So this has led to quite a lot of deaths and a lot of problems. So this is what is playing out now. That there is a sort of face-off between the federal government and the leaders of the TPLF.
The TPLF, okay. Ambassador, yes, you said there a while ago that he refused to, Abiy Ahmed, I'm talking about the Prime Minister, refused to accept that coalition of the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, and there's been long-standing tension between the government and the TPLF. One would want to know or find out, what was Abiy Ahmed's reason for not accepting that coalition with the TPLF? What reasons did he adduce for his stance?
Well, I think we have to look at it in its proper context. The Tigrayans, the Amharas, the Oromos that are in the majority, they are formed the integrated part of Ethiopia, and they have a constitution. But what is unique about the Ethiopian constitution in their democratic experience is that people like Meles Zenawi, who was a Tigray, and that rule, they were pursuing what they called a democratic state. That part of the democratization process is to corn out a development trajectory for Ethiopia. And that was why in all the indices, we find that Ethiopia was doing very well in terms of the MDGs and the SDGs. But the multi-ethnic crisis remained. Here you have the majority group, the Oromos, for instance, and then the Amharas. And then the TPLF, the Tigrayans, lording it over the years. So when Abiy Mohammed came in and he didn't want to be part of that coalition, the Tigrayans were not, or the leaders were not happy. But as far as he's concerned, he is trying to coin a new diplomatic culture of reconciliation and a consensus government for Ethiopia. Of course, this is not very acceptable, and that was what led to this face-off in the north by the Tigrayans. And for the federal government, they believe that it is the leaders that they used to be the ruling power that are trying to foster these problems among the Tigrayans, while the government wants to integrate the Tigrayans, the Amharas, and others into a process of reconciliation. They believe that the Tigrayan leaders are reluctant, and they want to pursue maybe what has happened in the past, and it is leading to a lot of problems, the face-off between the forces.
Indeed.
And Ethiopia, over the year.
Sorry, yes. Ambassador, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but how much of an impact did that parliamentary elections in September have on the escalation of what we are seeing now, and the role of the African Union in all of this? The African Union, like other international bodies and regional bodies, have said there should be ceasefire and there should be dialogue by all parties, but should they be doing more?
Well, the TPLF and the North, they have defied the government by going along with the elections. And they have also made a statement that they are not going to recognize the parliament, they are not going to recognize the federal government, they are not going to recognize Abiy Ahmed as the leader until the elections was done. Of course, this was considered a defiance, and that a lead to a secession, and it's something that might even escalate into a civil war. This is the position that the government has always taken, and the international organizations, sub-regional organizations, the AU has intervened. The United Nations have already issued a statement, the Security Council, that you must de-escalate the tensions before it now goes into a civil war, and allow and come to table to be able to discuss it. The IGAD is a sub-regional organization. The IGAD is the International Development Group for the Horn of Africa.
Yeah.
They have also issued a statement, and the AU too, the Peace and Security Council, that coming to table to discuss the issues provides the way forward. But as the things are moving out in terms of high-profile assassination, you need to know that even media is ethnic, and there is the accusation on the government that they have, each time there's a problem, there's a clamp down on the internet to sort of localize the issues. But it is of concern internationally because of the position of Ethiopia in the Horn of Africa, and the role that it plays as the diplomatic or the political capital of Africa, where the AU and the ECA are located. Indeed. So it's of concern. Everyone is worried that a lot needs to be done in bringing all the factions to the table.
All right, Ambassador, you mentioned this little, but let's take it deeper and expand it. Are there fears, or are the fears being entertained in certain quarters of a civil war in Ethiopia unfounded, or are there real basis for these fears?
Could you please come again, because I didn't very much get the question.
All right, I'll ask it again. I'm asking whether fears are being entertained in certain quarters that there's a likelihood of civil war. And I'm asking, are these fears unfounded, or are there real basis for this fear?
Well, I mean, when the fears are justified because of the trajectory of Ethiopia. You recall that this is a country that fought the Italians to a standstill. It was never colonized, and the Battle of Padua saw the Ethiopians routing out the Italians. They also had a long-drawn war with Eritrea. And it was quite a lot of very serious war until Abiy Mohammed came in and fostered these relations with Afewaki that earned him the Nobel Prize winner within a very short time, 2 years of his rule. So the stakes are very different, are very serious, because Ethiopia, the ethnic, multi-ethnic dimensions of the problem is is very serious. Added to that is also the geopolitical issues around their Renaissance Dam, with the problems over the Nile with Egypt. So a lot of people are interested in what happens in Ethiopia and the ability to solve its multi-ethnic and multi-religious problems. So those fears are not far-fetched. And that is why everyone is calling. And Ethiopia has a very important role to play. In the Horn of Africa, in Sudan, in South Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti, and even within the African Union, Ethiopia plays a very critical role because it's the seat of the AU. So that explains why a lot has to be done to bring all the real parties to the table before it escalates into a serious political crisis. Because if the Tigrayans, if it succeeds, there are other minority groups within Ethiopia. And since the coalition of the EPDRF is no longer existing, this might encourage others in terms of the multi-ethnicity, the heterogeneity of their systems to disintegrate. And that is something of concern to the African Union, and it's also of concern to the international community.
Indeed. And Ambassador, beyond the political crisis and the humanitarian crisis that may snowball and has started snowballing from this, what's the impact on regional security? I mean, you've talked about the important role of Ethiopia in the Horn of Africa. Would there be consequences, serious ones, for the regional security?
Of course, that goes without saying, Adesua, because of the role that Ethiopia plays in IGAD, the mediation role that it plays in the Horn of Africa. Not to talk about Somalia. Ethiopia is one of the prominent countries that are engaged in peace support operations. Even some people say that it has now overtaken Nigeria in terms of supplying troops for peace support operations. So that role cannot be undermined. And also in terms of its involvement in South Sudan, and then talk of the terrorist incursions in in East Africa, in the Horn of Africa, with Somalia, with South Sudan, with the Al-Shabaab incursions, and also the terrorists. So Ethiopia has continued to play that important role, and that is the fear that when things are stable in Ethiopia, things will of course be stable in the Horn of Africa.
All right.
So that importance cannot be,
overemphasized.
undermined.
All right. It's been reported that thousands of civilians have crossed the border into Sudan. You were talking about Sudan a while ago, which, of course, exacerbates the refugee situation. What's your sense of this situation of things?
Well, this is very ironic, because when the TPLF, the Tigrayans that were in the ruling majority, were fighting Mengistu, they were in the bushes in Sudan. Most of the Tigrayan leaders that ruled Ethiopia for over 30 years, they were liberation movements harbored by Sudan. And that's how people like Meles Zenawi, who was sort of the champion of this democratic movement within the broader coalition of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, of which TPLF was a member, a prominent member. They were there in the forest fighting Mengistu. Mengistu, who is still now in the exile, the communist leader that took over from Haile Selassie, that is now domiciled in Zimbabwe. So the humanitarian elements now of Ethiopians now moving into Sudan as refugees is also something to worry about, because not only will that aggravate the problem in Sudan, and they already have a full plate. But it will also destabilize, capable of destabilizing the region, because there will be, and you know that humanitarian engagements, forced displacements, have now become a very serious issue in Africa. We have IDPs now, we have refugees all across, we have people that are moving into looking for the golden fleece. So these movements, and there have been reported killings, a very serious humanitarian crisis. It will exacerbate this problem. So there is need for international action to be able to get the fighting forces to foster peace, have a ceasefire, and come to table to be able to discuss the way the Ethiopian the new democracy that Abiy Mohammed is trying to pursue should now go. But at the same time, I mean, countries, because I know that Ethiopia respects Nigeria. I served in Ethiopia as ambassador to the Republic of Ethiopia and also to Djibouti. And I was permanent representative of Nigeria in the African Union, pursuing quite a lot of peace and security issues. So I know that a timely intervention of the peace and security and the United Nations Security Council, and of course the IGAD, are very key to this area before it escalates into a civil war.
Okay. The government seems adamant in bringing the Tigray leadership to justice. And moments ago, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed tweeted that Dr. Mulu Nega has been appointed as the chief executive of the Tigray regional state. You talked about the role Nigeria should play and has been playing. Specifically, Ambassador, what should Nigeria be doing intervening in this crisis in Ethiopia?
Well, as I said, Nigeria is a prominent member of the the African Union, a member of the Peace and Security Council, and a respected member in terms of our involvement over the years in mediation, in peace engagements. And you know that the principle that guarantees relations within the African Union is that principle of non-indifference in the affairs of member states as against non-intervention in the affairs of member states. AU now maintains the principle of non-indifference. And I think that is going to guide us in terms of the engagement of the Peace and Security Council, that is the largest, is the highest platform for dealing with peace and security issues, humanitarian issues within member states. And I'm sure that within that context, and of course on bilateral, we have very good bilateral arrangements, the relation between Nigeria and Ethiopia. There are personal contacts between the two ministers of foreign affairs. And of course, I want to believe between the Prime Minister and our President. And I believe that all this will play out in exploring all avenues to ensure that Ethiopia reconciles and follow a path of reconciliation and dialogue on this issue.
All right, Ambassador. The Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is accusing the TPLF of cruelty. and says that when the army took control of the town of Sheraro in Tigray, they found bodies of executed force personnel whose hands and feet were tied. On the other hand, Amnesty is claiming scores and likely hundreds have been stabbed to death in Kadera. So what's the way out of this imbroglio? What should government be doing or seem to be doing to get peace to reign and stop this killings across both divides?
Well, when things like this occur, when there are difficulties between internal problems within countries, a lot of ideas do come in. Getting to the table provides a very important way forward. But at the same time, internally there are structures. Might be sending an independent delegation or mediation of some head of states within the Horn itself, or the AU committee, or even, I know that the media is very strong. Media is very strong in Ethiopia, but unfortunately divided along multi-ethnic lines. So at least assembling a committee or a delegation of good offices committee to really look, to go into into all these regions, feudal regions, to really get the facts on the ground and prefer certain solutions through the instrumentality of the AU or the IGAD or even the United Nations with a view to finding the solutions. Because, the government is pursuing a line to say that it is not even the Tigrayans, but leaders of the TPF, some leaders of the TPF that are trying to defy or to mislead the Tigrayans people. And in that context, not only are they fighting and fighting the federal forces, but also engaged in a lot of malpractices and killing. But on the other side, the Tigrayans are saying that Abiy is using brute force to be able to force the Tigrayans into his line of democracy, and that this does not augur well for the democratic processes that the EPDLF of old, of which they were the ruling, they were the dominant party, they were pursuing. That for them also, they want Ethiopia to follow a line, a path of real democracy that will foster consensus, national consensus and reconciliation. So, but with all this, everybody will have their own sides. And meanwhile, lives are being lost, properties are being lost. So it is a call on the international community. It's a long for like-minded people, bearing in mind that any trouble that brews in Ethiopia would affect the peace and security architecture in Africa, because that is where most of these issues are discussed. And there's need for peace in the Horn. Because we had President Trump saying openly that he was going to support Egypt on the issue of the dam. I mean, before this escalates into international dimension, people start taking sides. I think Africa, the AU, and the international organizations needs to come together
and do something about
to find solutions.
All right, Ambassador, before we let you go, just one last point. Let's talk about the UN. The UN is saying that vital aid supplies to hundreds of thousands of people in northern Ethiopia are at risk because of this conflict. And that's a very dangerous trend. What's your sense?
Well, could you come again, please?
Yeah, I'm saying that UN is saying that vital aid supplies to hundreds of thousands of people in northern Ethiopia are at risk because of the conflict. This conflict we're talking about, aid supplies, and that's a very dangerous trend. And I'm asking, what's your sense of that trend?
Well, it's very dangerous because, as I said, I mean, Amnesty International has come out with a lot of reports, and there's a lot of movements now across the region to Sudan, I can imagine even to Eritrea, and there have even been some accusations that they have seen some Eritrean forces. One hopes that it's not going back into the situation of the people now taking sides, because these are all in the north. And, you know, it is potentially dangerous. And that is why there are fears of real escalation of this problem at the national level, with the international, some countries also taking sides. But this is the reason why it's important that both internal dimensions of coming to the table and the international efforts should be mustered to de-escalate the tensions and come to the path of peace and reconciliation.
Indeed, Ethiopia is Africa's second most populous nation. Ambassador OLUSEGUN AKINSANYA, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the developing story from Ethiopia with us on Newsday.